We're still looking at the Coalition for Revolution calling for days of agitation. A continuation of the days of rage against the Nigerian government, governance of Nigeria itself. Now let me ask, we have in the studio the co-conveners of the Coalition for Revolution, Comrade Sheni Ajayi, and we have also Larry Legacy in the studio. It's a pleasure having you on SaharaTv.
It's great to be here. Thanks.
Let me start by asking you, what's unique about this campaign, Days of Rage, agitation, so to say? I mean, what does it signal?
Well, I think it's necessary to know that it's a continuation. It's still a continuation of the entire, Revolution Now campaign. It's a protest movement that is actually touching on several aspects of our governance, and it's also exposing, these various crises that we are actually facing in this society. And today we are actually focusing on, the huge, we are focusing on the question of the attack on our civil liberties. Today we have scores of activists in detention without trial. The Constitution says that without, anything else, nobody should be detained for more than 48 hours without trial. Today, Sowore today is 45 days. Other activists have spent days, Now, we also are calling attention to the fact that still in the dungeons of the DSS police and in the prisons are scores of Nigerians languishing, in prison without trial, or with some of these technical withholding charges, which elongates people, And if you go to the prisons, some of our comrades, that were actually unfortunately had that experience in the last protest, they could testify to the fact that in our prisons in Lagos, scores of young folks, scores of children are in detention. So when you put all this together, and you look at how now, for just voicing out the desire of the majority that there is the need for change, you get clamped in prison. That is the reality of our situation today, and that agitation needs to be, to be raised up.
Now, let me get your perspective on this, Larry Legacy. What concretely do you intend to achieve as far as this days of agitation is concerned, concretely?
I think, clearly speaking, looking at what we've been asking for from August 5th, it's not enough to say we have a democracy. We want to have a country where people's fundamental human rights will be protected, economic, political, and social. You want to be sure of the fact that Nigerians are living a happy life. We've all been seeing what is happening to our nationals outside the country. We've seen what's happening in South Africa. We've seen the kind of embarrassment our people suffer, even in neighboring countries like Ghana. And it's quite unfortunate when you look back inward for those who have decided to stay in the country. Electricity is not quite available. Factories are folding up. Unemployment is rising. Education is in comatose. By the time you have all this situation and you look at it, these are the things that bring life expectancy to so low a level of 42, 43 for Nigerians. But if you look at it, it's a class struggle. When we say the life expectancy in Nigeria is about 42, 43, you find out that those who are in the upper echelon are living up to 90s. It is the poor people that are dying so young. It is the common people that don't have access to education. They're the one that don't have access to food. They're the one that is suffering what we're talking about when we talk about poverty. You find out that over 90% of the resources of this country is being used to service, to fund the life of just 1% of the total population, while the rest live in squalor. Now, this is a situation that we shouldn't keep on looking at it. And that's why we've said that there must be a change in the social order. When people talk about corruption, they think about corruption that it's just a genetic thing about Nigeria. No, it's not. Corruption is systemic. You find out that as of today, an average Nigerian is made to live a corrupt life because of the system itself, not because we don't have moral values. Our culture enables us to keep high level of moral standard. But the problem is the economic situation in the country is not helping matters. If you are a pastor or a church member and you go to church on Monday, Wednesday, Friday vigil, and even Sunday, even if you dissolve Jesus Christ into a glass cup of water and you drink it to increase your faith, it will not increase your moral level. As long as you collect 30,000 naira minimum wage and you have 3 kids in school, you have to pay about 100,000 naira. At the end of the day, you are paying about 900,000 naira in a year and your total income is 360,000 naira. You will be corrupt. You will be prone to bribes. These are the basic reality. And we are saying that to take away all these issues, we must look at how we structure the system in such a way that people can live a decent life. This shouldn't be an issue to argue or to fight about. A good government would have reasoned with us, listened to us, and begin to look at solutions. This is what we call national development, for God's sake.
Commissioner, President Mohammadu Buhari has continued to face criticism, especially for his administration's record on human rights, particularly with regards to crackdown on protesters and the detention of Sowore and others without trial. How concerned should Nigerians be on Buhari and other governors as far as their growing intolerance for criticism is concerned? Should Nigerians be concerned?
I think they should be alarmed. They should be alarmed. And in the next coming period, more people will be alarmed with the way the situation has degenerated. We know what has just happened in Ekiti. 2 students were gunned down. Part of the excesses we talk about, that is the one we can talk about. We can, the media reported scores. Go to the stations, you will see scores of people being violated. So they have unleashed a monstrous terror on the people. And it's only a regime that has no regard, for, humanity, but regard for its own peculiar interest that will actually be embarking on this kind of terrorism against the people, just to keep the people from actually asking, requesting for their rights. Sowore's case is classic. 45 days. Since the military rule, this is the first decisive case of gross human rights violation against activists. Agbajalingo and Mandate. The case of Mandate is even more, dangerous because he has simply disappeared. Today we hear of kidnappers, but the case of Mandate, complete disappearance, of a young lad, a student, Agbajalingo, a journalist, Sowore, a publisher. So when you put all this together and when you put what they actually are part of, together, you see the real picture. For asking for economic for all, for asking for a justifiable end to insurgency, for asking for a minimum wage, living with minimum wage, and for asking for free education and for system change. For that, is in detention without trial, and they are calling for extension, to 90 days, 45 days today, because we count the weekends, they don't count weekends, so which makes it 45 days on the 21st. But with weekends, it's today, exactly today, that is 45 days, in detention without trial. Solitary confinement. And who are the people that are supposed to be in solitary confinement? Condemned prisoners, are supposed to be. So the mental torture for committing no crime, and we can go on and on. And we're expecting the trial. 45 days you should have, or 4 days or 24, 48 hours, you should have actually, if you have a case. And we can tell all Nigerians that at the end of the day, you will see no case the same way we have seen with all the others. You will see no case. And nobody is being brought to book for violating people's fundamental rights.
Larry Legacy, how worried are you that the federal government and the state security forces had described the revolutionary protests, for example, the days of rage, and now probably these days of agitation, will be tagged as a treason, a threat to the peace, unity, and constitutionalism of this country? I mean, are you not worried?
I think that's pure hypocrisy, if I should look at it very well. And I'll clearly say this. A government that is willing to negotiate with bandits, a government that is interested in changing detainees with bandits that are in custody, a government that would negotiate with bandits and use hard-earned taxpayers' money to negotiate with them, giving it out to them, and would not see genuine activists the need for them to dialogue on how to improve the conditions of living of the people is being hypocritical. And for me, it's all about time that Nigerians must just rise up and begin to ask basic questions. If we actually called and asked, fought for democracy, we must ensure that Democrats act in that way, if they are one at all, in such a way that the basic understanding of what democracy means is at least being held onto. For us, we're not going to go back. Most of those countries we're talking about, we're looking at where democracy have worked. Followers have been able to hold their leaders accountable. And that's exactly what we're doing with Revolution now.
Commissioner, one of the questions on the minds of an average Nigerian, so to say, is what exactly does these days of rage, days of agitation intend to achieve? Are you asking for a change in the leadership of government? Is it a change of government, a constitutional review, or restructuring of the whole structure? What exactly are you asking for? That's a question on the mind.
Exactly, what is exactly being requested for is the discussion amongst the victims of the system. The process of change commences from the minds of the oppressed, not from the minds of the elite. The discussions is not, will not interest, the elite, because they don't have any basis. But to the unemployed, to the students, to the farmers, to the rural poor, to the sick, to the disabled, this discussion is actually a discussion to actually raise their consciousness. And the minute we can start having that engagement and having that focus and having a programmatic guide, that minute, the process of change has commenced. Don't forget that a people we only allow as long as the tyranny, lasts, is the people that allowed it. The day they all come out and say no, that's the end of it. No matter how much power they think they can display. That is the reality of the day. The discussion starts from the mind. The first liberation is the liberation of the mind and the raising of the consciousness of the working and people and the youth. They are the victims who actually this program is actually for. It's their conscientization that is most important. The regime, is for when the slaves were revolting during the anti-slavery campaign, those who owned the slaves called those who advocated for freedom terrorists. So it continues like that. Today in Nigeria, 99% of society is in bondage, and only a single percent, of the population is actually totally well off. So when you have that, put that in question, that it is a question of ideology, raising the level amongst the overwhelming majority of the population.
Let me lend a voice to that. Purely speaking, we're asking for system change. We're not talking about regime change. We've had the same ruling elite ruling Nigeria over the years, and things have not changed. Yep. Clearly speaking, you see level of unemployment rising every day. Poverty level is increasing. The number of out-of-school children, as we are talking about, is about 10.5 million naira between age of 5 and 14 years, which means that potentially as a country, we are going to harvest lots of criminals in the next coming years. And they will be buying more arms and ammunitions, increasing money on security to kill them, to jail them. For God's sake, that is not where we should be heading towards. We are asking for a system that would bring in place the efficient utilization of human resources, proper education, putting them to use to develop the economy, rather than wasting them. This is why we are saying we want a system change, not just regime. There had not been anything fundamentally different, whether the APC or the PDP in the last couple of years.
It's 20
Electricity
years.
has not been provided. To be an ordinary baba, the kind of resources you will be looking for, and the labor you will be putting into ensuring that your generator works, fueling it and what have you, it's enormous. These are the things that are killing businesses. And these are the things that is causing high level of unemployment. So what we're talking about is a complete overhaul of the system, putting it into perspective in such a way that it will be viable for even the economy of a common man.
Now, the Nigerian state security forces will be gathering at the venue of your protest. Are you and your fellow activists afraid of a crackdown?
Well, I think it's necessary for us to know that we have a right to protest. It's a fundamental human right. People have their right to speech associate, and to the extent that people are not prepared to allow anybody violate their rights, we stand on our grounds. The state security services, the police, they are all welcome, to provide security for peaceful gathering, to the extent that nobody is advocating for violence. We want the peaceful discussion, and they know one thing: it is they who don't actually want that discussion because they know what it means. Why people want to discuss their future, discuss their state, discuss? Why are you saying they shouldn't discuss if you have nothing to hide?
Political observers, Larry Legacy, have stated severally that Nigeria is only half prime for the kind of revolution or system change that you're talking about. In what ways can Nigeria manage a peaceful and inclusive transition at this time?
We can. In fact, if you look at it very well, the conditions are right. Today, we are the poverty capital of the world. What tells you more that we need a change? Do you continue in misery? Do you continue with this kind of situation where over 50% of the population are doing nothing? So for me, it's clear. The conditions are ripe. I think the only thing is that we have a ruling elite, which is no more than 1% of the total population, holding everybody to ransom. So for God's sake, whosoever is saying that has something wrong with his or her own analysis. For anybody that have that, or let me say, bears or is having the interests of the masses, love for humanity, there can't be any other time than now to sit down and find a solution to the myriads of problem that is bedeviling us.
Now, let me get this. You're asking Nigerians now to come out to the streets where they will have to confront the Nigerian policemen. Are you aware that they do not have the right equipment to disperse protesters other than live bullets and tear gas?
And I think, again, it's necessary to put things in proper perspective. We never called Nigerians to come out and confront the Nigerian police. We told them to come out and agitate, against the current state of attacks on our civil liberties. It's fundamental. It's an intellectual gathering. It's materials are available for people to circulate, discussions, open air discussions are to be engaged in. People have to interact as regards the situation in the country. So the minute people discuss their situation and also get involved in the process of changing in that minute, we are good to see a new country. This discussion is what is paramount in our own agenda. We are not calling for people to come out and engage the police. The police are supposed to provide protection for the guardians of people, who are discussing and who are probably marching. They are to provide that security, for them. If we have an orderly society, that is what it is, and there must be semblance of that. We must insist that they do what they are actually paid to do.
Now, about the earlier protest wherein Sowore was arrested and detained, do you think it was a failure? What lesson has been learned from it?
August 5 was quite successful. Whether you like it or not, the attention of over 5 million persons on social media was being called upon to the fact that we're talking about change, meaningful change this time around in Nigeria. And when we're talking about revolution now, even on August 5, we're not just talking about it in vacuum. We're talking about it with regards to the issue of demand for the 30,000 naira minimum wage, qualitative education, free education for all, which we keep on telling people is an investment. It's a security for the entire population. It's not just for those who have been educated, for anybody that understands it. We're talking about the fact that we want a system that would not harbor systemic corruption for the ruling elites. We're talking about an economy that works for all. These are the fundamental things we're demanding. And when you look at all these basic demands, I don't think any out of it is foreign or things we can throw away. They are all for Nigerians.
If we can also add, from a historic perspective, that you see the process, the first step for change is actually, in the thoughts itself and people gathering around it. For the Nigerian independence, similar things did happen. In the face of British, British imperialism, saying that independence was totally off the agenda. the desire for political independence, started from the mind. We can't forget that in the 50s, the movement called the Zikist movement came out with a 13-point agenda, which actually guided, the political agitation for independence of the country. So, it starts. That is a first step. But you see, for us to have a guide, we have seen numerous uprisings, numerous protests, but there is no guide. The political programs, necessary to guide that movement is what, we have actually injected into it. And for the people to discuss it, get organized around it, and start taking actions. It's not just a matter of the presidency. The state is there. Don't forget, Abajaligo is being castrated because he raised critical questions in crossover state. A mandate is being held based on student activism on the campus. So you see, it goes down to the level of local government. People must no longer watch. You have a councillor or you have a local council, who is supposed to provide, for the society in spite of collecting huge amounts from the government, and nothing is being done. To the extent that we keep quiet about all these things, to that extent, these things will continue. But to the extent that you are engaging them, they will start knowing that something has to happen. To the extent that we can watch and let somebody violate our fundamental human right by castrating somebody, people, and say, well, it's none of our business. But to the extent that we are questioning it, to that extent, and exposing it to the whole world, to that extent, we are taking steps towards, transforming the society. These are the minimum steps that are necessary, which in the final analysis, when the situation becomes, people become more conscientized, they will know, when they are going to enforce their democratic rights, who are worthy of, being given the responsibility to guide the society. That's essentially what is necessary to be done now.
Now, let me get your final thoughts on this. Let me start with you, Larry Nagisi. As Nigerians brace up for another round of protest, not just in Nigeria, we're informed this is taking place in other parts of the world.
Right now.
28 countries. Well, that's amazing. As Nigerians actually brace up for this round of protesting all around the world, when does this end? What will have been accomplished at the end of this?
I think the end point is we are achieving our aim and our success. A country where everybody's fundamental human rights will be respected. A country where the government will be serving the people and not ruling. A country where things would work, electricity, good roads, good health, education, and all that. Look, we're all tired. You travel to other parts of the world, and the way you're being looked at is as if you're coming from hell. Look at what's happening in South Africa, for God's sake. Look at what is happening to us in Ghana. By the time you look at it, even Nigerians outside there, they are all not happy with what is happening. People are dying in here. The level of social vices is increasing every day. Most of our ladies are going into prostitution not because they want it, but because it has become an essential way to survive in this system. Most of our young kids going into Yahoo Plus, kidnapping everywhere, robbery left and right. You can't sleep with your two eyes closed. And we keep quiet to say that everything is well. It's impossible. So the end point of this is until we get a better country.
Final words on these thoughts on this.
As you said, the best that will inevitably develop is that change will take place. Consistent agitations, consistent raising of the level is what is essentially necessary. People will learn, by the day. And we have said several things as regards the future and the reason why everybody must, get involved. And things are being confirmed on a daily basis, and we are seeing that in the first instance, we have been lied to by the bourgeois politicians. And we know that if we do not stand firm as a people, more calamities. We are already seeing it in the electricity. We are seeing coming. We are seeing they are claiming that for them to pay minimum wage, they have to increase prices of all goods and services. We're expecting for other price increments. It's the same old agenda. It's the same old agenda. If the people do not, start taking their own decisive steps now, it is not going to change for the better underneath this style or this system of governance.
Comrades, thank you very much for being on
Thank you for
Sahara
having
TV.
us.
Really appreciate this.